All right, we should be live. Perhaps now we're live. I don't know. I never know exactly when I'm live. Looking at D Live right now. I'm working good over on Entropy. Not sure if D Live is running or not. Oh, yeah, here we are. Had to refresh. All right, buddy. Thanks for telling me. It sounds good. That was about to be my next question. I've done a sound check, but you never know. So, hopefully, everyone had a wonderful Memorial Day. I had a hectic day, but it was good nonetheless. It's good to have several days off. We haven't done much around here. I made some deviled eggs for the folks that have been teaching us in the birthing classes. Yesterday was the last one we had. Hey, Holly, how we doing? So my wife kept telling me that I needed to make them my pickled deviled eggs with crab meat, and then I heard that they couldn't. Some of the people in the household, the lady that's helping us out, she'll be with us during the birth as well, um, are iffy with certain foods. So I ended up going, Super Saiyan and creating various kinds. Um, so these were crab stuffed on the one side, and that's like a mound of crab, folks. Different than I've made them before, but no less wonderful. And then these other ones were I made like teriyaki style smoked salmon and very very tasty. If you were ever eaten like the Japanese eggs and sushi, that's kind of what I was going for with the flavor there. And then I had these over here. So these were bacon, barbecue, and smoked salmon. These were probably everyone's favorite, the most palatable. And then these were Mediterranean shrimp, so we had that going on too. And there's plenty of leftovers, so the wife and I and the daughter need to devour what's left. Although we did try to give some away. Um, so yeah, there was good food, and of course I had we ate at my parents before that, and we went over there for the birthing class, and they made us ribs and hamburgers, so lots of food yesterday. Probably don't need to eat today. That's funny you mentioned Doll Huck, that you mentioned smoking a brisket, because the folks, again, we've made pretty close friends with, and in fact one of the gentlemen I knew I trained with down in Florida knows them, so it was an interesting coincidence that I had to go travel 1,000 miles to make a friend that lives around the corner, and then he knows these people too. Um, but I would say that that's also, in my perspective, the way that the Lord works in your life when you're searching for certain things. In any case, yeah, he talked about making a brisket last week, and I asked him, I said, dude, he said it didn't turn out that well. It was too dry, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, did you brine it? And both him and his wife looked at each other like, oh man, I didn't know you were supposed to brine it. And I thought, well, maybe you can do it without a brine. I've never made a brisket before, but I'm pretty sure you're supposed to brine it so it retains the juiciness. Um, but hey, I mean, I got lots of tricks. I am a chef in my own kitchen. I've never cooked professionally, but I definitely like to cook and experiment. And in fact, three of those deviled eggs, all but the crab stuffed ones, I came up with myself like on the spot. So just playing with favors or flavors. I mean, favors. Yes, play with favors too. Holly says, I started intermittent fasting yesterday and y'all are killing me. Well, Holly, if it makes you feel any better, I've been up since I was up late last night. I couldn't quite get to sleep, but I've been up since 11. I think I went to bed around 3. So, and all I've had today is coffee and my afternoon. I've been doing matcha lattes here on stream, so This is mostly matcha, butter, a tiny bit of milk, and some honey. This is all I've had. So it's typical of me. I'll eat later, for sure. It's also how I stay lean. Lean without trying too hard. uh, Dalhawk, I'm not quite sure what that reference is to. In any case, whatever. If you're talking in the chat there or not. Let me go check the other chats real quick. Make sure to say hi to everybody. Also, remind everyone to like, share, subscribe. You know, the thing. Seeing nothing new on D Live. And of course, there is an entropy. And if, as you guys know, you can donate over there or on D Live. YouTube, I'll probably never monetize. If I do, it'll be another channel that has nothing to do with politics. Because I just don't think that giving them that kind of control over cultural, political commentary is ideal. Hey, Shelly, thanks for showing up. You're going to have to watch the beginning to see all my beautiful food. Not the only things that I make, guys, by the way. So, just some housekeeping real quick. Tomorrow, my daughter is graduating from high school. It's a weird drive-through graduation, but we want to be there early. So I'm not really going to be able to stream here tomorrow, and hopefully it doesn't cut into my time on the Ends Justify the Memes. So that will run, as usual, at 7 p.m. But if it does go late, guys, it's because of me. And I'll try to work with Tank on that. Maybe he can let you guys know in the comments or whatever. But, you know, we may start a little late tomorrow, unfortunately. But yes, I will not stream here, but I will stream here Thursday and Friday. And again, this is in part why I started streaming, because schedules were going to be hokey. My wife is at her appointment right now without me, which isn't a big deal, but she did take my daughter. But yeah, as we're counting down, I know she wants me to be there as often as possible, so need to do that. So probably I'll see what she says today. If she's scheduled next Tuesday again, probably I'll end up going with her next Tuesday. But today was one of those things. It's like I can't not stream for 5 days, like since Friday. So obviously there's the Ends Justify the Memes, but there's stuff I want to get to here on this channel as well. So real quick, guys, I wanted to talk to you all about Memorial Day. I didn't want to go into this in too much painstaking detail, but I'm curious if you all understood the origins of Memorial Day, and that it's actually rooted in some ancient traditions, but also in Southern tradition, and it is truly about the end of the Civil War and the folks that died. And I think that that's really, really important in our world today, given that we're in the midst of, although not the worst ever, but we're in the midst of this Civil War. This war between factions and who will rule the government. And eventually this is going to get further out of hand one way or another. Either there's going to be open battle, which there sort of already is, but I mean, there'll be governments set up, private factions, there'll be schisms within the government. That is, people will break away and so-called peaceful divorces, all of those things. And they probably won't be allowed for that. Or there'll be a purge. There'll be a purge from the left. They'll literally go through. They'll start gulagging people and whatever else. Now, I find that hard to believe here in the United States, given that the more in the countryside you go to, the more likely you're going to find people who are armed and willing to protect their land. And you're also going to find sheriff's departments and other local municipal police not supporting left-wing ideologies. Yes, Holly, I did see that Kamala said, enjoy your long weekend. She came back, though, after some backlash with that. I thought about covering it. I'll tell you what, Matt Christensen the other night over on his show, his Sunday night live show did a really good job. I mean, Matt always does a good job. He's very thoughtful in how he does things. Unlike me, I just kind of go and ramble and run my mouth off. Um, but having known Matt for some time, not like we're besties or anything, but having known him, I know he's very thoughtful in the way he presents the information. So, in any case, here we have a document. This is from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm going to breeze through it real quick. It says 3 years after the Civil War ended, on May 5th, 1868, the head of an organization of Union veterans, the Grand Army of the Republic, established Declaration Day as a time for the nation to decorate the graves of the war dead with flowers. Major General John A. Logan declared it should be May 30th. It is believed the date was chosen because flowers would be in bloom all over the country. The first large observance was held that year at Arlington National Cemetery across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. The ceremonies centered around the mourning draped veranda of the Arlington mansion. Once the homes of General Robert E. Lee, various Washington officials, including General and Mrs. Ulysses S. Grant, presided over the ceremonies. After speeches, children from the soldiers and sailor orphans, or orphan home, and members of the GAR made their way through the cemetery, strewing flowers on both Union and Confederate graves, reciting prayers and singing hymns. And then it talks about local observance and how where they first started to be claimed at. So local springtime tributes of the Civil War dead already had been held in various places. One of the first was in Columbus, Mississippi. So, and if you see, it goes down to Macon and Columbus, Georgia. There is some places in in PA. You have Richmond, Virginia. This was a thing that started largely in the South, but it was all over. It says in 1966, Congress and President Lyndon Johnson declared Waterloo, New York, the birthplace of Memorial Day. There, a ceremony on May 5th, 1866, honored local veterans. But this is typical of the modern paradigm, is it not? Since the Democrats gained power in the 20th century after Reconstruction, during the Progressive Era, what they have done is try to erase a lot of the idea of the nation's split, and they've tried to rewrite the history as if the Democrats were not the ones who were wishing for slavery or Jim Crow or any of those other things. And again, we have to understand that Southern culture is not the culture that's presented from the official story or from Hollywood or any of those things. Black and white people in Southern culture get along just fine. They generally always have. There was just an understanding of it was the way things worked. It's not like the Django, and I'm not saying that there weren't cases like that movie, but it's not like the Django where everyone in the South was all about slavery and horrible to slaves. You can read what they had to say about it. A lot of them were not fans. They were not fans at all. So anyways, you can find this little document. It's 3 pages. It's not anything hard to find. Just go look up the history of Memorial Day. It should come up in a Google or DuckDuckGo search. I wanted to go back here to just Wiki, since Wiki is a mainstream source of information, talking about Memorial Day again. And I'm not going to stay on this for too long. But it says it is a federal holiday of the United States honoring the mourning of military personnel who have died in the performance of military duties. And again, it goes through the basic things of Labor Day. It talks about John A. Logan again and the Grand Army of the Republic called for a Declaration Day. It said by 1890, every northern state had adopted it as a holiday. The World War was turned it into a generalized day for remembrance instead of just the Civil War. In 1971, Congress standardized the holiday as Memorial Day. So when, and I tend to talk about holidays like this because we tend to forget about them. So I tend to like to review the history a little bit. When we get to Veterans Day, I'll talk about that. I'll probably make a very long special video about Veterans Day, because Veterans Day is a day of remembrance of the end of war, but not anymore because we changed it. We changed it because we didn't end war, we kept warring. And so now what we've done is we've honored veterans instead of the end of war. So here we have presidents in the South, and there's a bunch of them there, and then presidents in the North. And then early national history relationship to the Confederate Memorial Day. So again, Warrenton, Virginia, Savannah, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, they all had these things in place. And Charleston, South Carolina, Columbus, Georgia. And you'll see the dates of these are from the 1860s. And then we go up to Gettysburg, and you have similar. So this, in a way, was a way to repair the nation and giving everyone this day of that horrible, bloody war. And it was a horrible, bloody war, folks. People were fighting their neighbors, practically, their fellow countrymen. People would leave certain states who sympathized with other states. You'd have Northerners go south and Southerners go north, and families became divided. It was a horrible thing. We're about to go through it again, unfortunately. Hopefully not on that scale, but again, very important. So following Lincoln's assassination, ceremonies were widespread, and more than 600,000 soldiers of both sides died in the war, meant that burial and memorization took on new cultural significance. Under the leadership of women during the war, an increasing formal practice of decorating graves had taken shape. And many of you know, if you don't know, maybe you didn't grow up around or never visited Civil War tombs or grave sites, but they're often unmarked. They're often just given a number. It's little tiny stones, so it's a kind of a sad thing, because no one will know those people or who they were, ever. If they never have children, their genetic lineage just ended. This is in 1865. The federal government also began creating the United States National Cemetery System for the Union war dead. By the 1880s, ceremonies were becoming more consistent across geography, as the GRA provided, or the GAR, that is, provided handbooks that presented specific procedures, poems, and Bible verses for local post commanders to utilize in planning the local events. Relationship to Confederate Memorial Day. In 1868, some Southern public figures began adding the label Confederate, as they would. The first official celebration of Confederate Memorial Day as a public holiday occurred in 1874, following a proclamation by the Georgia legislature. By 1816, 10 states celebrated it on June 3rd, the birthday of the Confederate States of American President Jefferson Davis. Other states chose late April dates. The Ladies Memorial Association played a key role in using Memorial Day rituals to preserve Confederate culture. And if you wonder why you barbecue and do all those stuff, I guarantee you that came out of the Southern culture. In any case, that's about all I have for that. I just wanted you guys to get a little background on it, because I don't know. I think about these things. Maybe you guys don't, but I think it's important to know where we come from. Look at the chat real quick. Remembrance Day, no, but we have Veterans Day, which is supposed to be Armistice Day. So, Armistice Day, of course, was the day that the end to end all wars, that is, the First World War, was over. But, we also had a Department of War that we Orwellianly renamed um, we Orwellianly named it the Department of Defense. So, and there you go. Thursday, November 11th, Armistice Day. And that's what Veterans Day is about, folks. It's not about honoring veterans who served, it's about the war ending. But again, I'll cover that another time. So, moving on, man, I got some stuff I want you guys to watch if you haven't seen them. If you hadn't seen it, now the one just aired last night because it's just a clip from Tim Pool, some things he said, but he was talking to a vet, an anti-war vet, and a America First vet, and he's running for Congress here in the midterms, and should be helping out Michael Cisco. I've already been in contact with him directly through Michael Witkoff, that is brother Augustine, and Michael Cisco is running in West Virginia here. Let's see if I can spell his name right. And he's a vet and an Orthodox Christian. Let's see if I can get his site up here. Well, that might help if I have the appropriate spelling. Here we go. We'll just get his Twitter up. So he is not in my district from what I understand. He's in the 1st district, but doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned because we need good candidates in. Now, again, I tell you guys, stop focusing on the federal government. But if there is an opportunity for you to do that, to help out, to do something that takes action, that changes things, please do. Don't take the idea that because the federal government is way off the rails, that it's not worth trying to get some people in there to get back on track. It's just that the real action, the real pushback is not going to be defeated in the swamp. You're going to have to work locally. And the problem is that locally, the left has taken over. And we can see that by the infiltration of the schools with leftism, wokeism, and their crazy cult mentalities. So in any case, Michael is here, Michael Cisco for Congress. If you want to go look him up, here is the website. It's Cisco 2022. And that's with an S, S-I-S-C-O. And I'll just bring up his bio real quick. It says Michael is a veteran and former infantryman of the Maryland and Florida National Guard, which is interesting because I'm from Maryland and got a lot of family in Florida. I've spent a lot of time in my life in Florida. In any case, before entering politics, Michael worked in a number of different fields, including truck driving and food service. He became an Orthodox Christian in 2014 and entered the public arena in 2018 as a political commentator. In 2019, he would become a volunteer team leader for Trump victory and eventually worked on several different campaigns. It says, arguably, his most impressive work was his management of Lauren Witzke's campaign in the U.S. Senate for Delaware, having received more votes than any Republican in history of the state of Delaware, even more than Donald Trump received in 2016. And it says, Michael still hosts a weekly live stream and podcast, The Michael Cisco Show. So, again, just look that up. So it's right here, available on Audible. And it looks like, we banned on YouTube. I like that. And also, if you don't recall, if you didn't watch the Ends Justify the Memes, that he will be speaking at literally a trad, as in traditional trad conference in Indiana here, I think on June 12th is what Michael said. I'd have to pull those links up because I don't recall. But in any case, just say, going to be getting involved in that as well, as much as I can, as much as my abilities allow. Holly says, here it's about all of it at the end of the First World War, active duty, Flanders Field, and Purple Heart families. Here it's just about veterans. Thank you for your service. I find most American holidays to be very empty because most Americans are like all about their, enjoying their burgers and fries and the hot dogs and the macaroni salad and the barbecue and whatever else, and there's no real reflection on the event. In any case, I've rambled long enough about various things. Looks like I have one viewer in D-Live, or I did. Appreciate that for leaving a comment there. No one on the entropies. If you guys you can not subscribe. You can donate over there or D-Live. Of course, there's a subscribe star as well. More importantly, though, like this, share it out. You can hit the notification bell because Holly likes that thing. I don't, but I don't like getting 1,001 notifications. So that goes back to dopamine receptors and why social media is not great for you and a bunch of other things. So I'm not a fan of that, but if it does not bother you, sure, hit the notification bell as well. All right. So I'm not sure where I want to start. I think I want to come back to this. If you guys haven't seen this, I think I want to start here because there's about 10 to 15 minutes of conversation I want to cover, I want to talk about here. And that's exactly right. It's exactly correct. And what's interesting is that this is mainstream. Now, I know a lot of people don't know Tim Pool, right? I know a lot of people don't do the YouTube thing, but I'm not going to prop up mainstream legacy media when so much of it is not real news. So much of it is legitimately true propaganda. So as I bring this up, I want you to understand that I'm talking about Tim and the things that he's saying that are good in this segment because he's got a lot of reach, and that's important. And if this is part of the mainstream narrative, which it's becoming, that's a good thing. That is winning. It's not winning if we don't act on it. You can believe whatever you want. If you don't act on it, it doesn't matter. Your beliefs don't stand up to your convictions. You have to act. And the bottom line is that a lot of people like to complain and like to get online and like to look at the news and never do anything or be involved. And I get it. You have a family. You don't have enough time. You don't have this or that. Well, look, you need to prioritize what you think it needs to be prioritized in your life. But taking care of your family is not going to work out well for you in the future if the world poisons them against you or creates a situation in which you cannot at all afford to take care of your family without government subsistence, without the crutches of the government handed to you because they broke your legs.
I mean, it is in the best interest of the companies.
By the way, guys, let me know if this is not loud enough or if I need to lower the volume or any of that kind of stuff.
That would go and harvest the timber to do it responsibly. You know, it's not in their best interest whatsoever to go and just clear cut acreage after acreage. I mean, these families, these timber giants, they've been doing this stuff for quite a while, and there's a way to do it. And there's a rule for the government, but I don't think the federal government. There's a rule for the state government and the local government to have some sort of checks and balances in there. So if you did get a bad actor who's like, aha, I'm gonna go clear cut all these forests, aha, they'll never catch me. You know, yeah. That we do have the mechanism to stop them, but having the federal government control half of our state land is just ridiculous.
I think back to 2016 watching Hillary versus Trump, and you know, it really felt to me like we were entering this really dangerous period where the U.S. superiority was being threatened. We are the superpower. We control so much around the world, military bases everywhere over Syria, and she was warned that would lead to war with Russia. She said she didn't care. Right. She was like, so what? Well, you'll go to war with Russia. It has to be done. Trump said, why do we want to go to war with Russia?
Right.
We don't want to do that. We want to come back and make America great.
Yeah.
So I viewed Trump as someone who was saying, listen, we shouldn't be doing these things. The crash, if it hits us, we need to be prepared for it.
Yes.
And if we keep looking externally to just forcing our way to try and maintain this rickety system, we're gonna have that long fall. We're not going to have the ability to produce medicine, which we saw with COVID.
Yeah.
It's remarkable that when we're in this mass pandemic, no vitamin C, China makes it. Masks, China makes it.
Yeah.
Antibiotics, China makes it.
Yeah.
That to me was really incredible.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the lesson that we learned from the masks right there alone. That should have been a wake-up call. Okay, it was masks, and it turned out that it really wasn't that big of a deal. But what if that was something absolutely essential?
I mean, it was...
So the conversation is about production, of course. It's about many things. It's about the warring state. It's about the inflation. It's about how we use money here in the U.S. and what the motivations are. And so as they're talking, and they're talking about not producing things here because we want to have a strong central core right here in America that can take care of itself in case of emergency. They're going to go on into the actual motivations of these folks that run things, folks like Joe Biden, who are literally purposely destroying the economy right now. And you could say, well, Bill, that's your opinion that he's doing it on purpose. It's not an opinion. It is what he's doing, and he's purposely doing it. Now, he might think that he's doing something good, but I'm pretty sure he knows better. And I'm pretty sure all these people know better. I'm not going to attribute any of these people stupidity for their malice. And I do think that that's generally a fair thing to do with folks, that often people's ignorance is more likely the cause than malice. But I'm getting error messages if I'm streaming, so about my streaming, that is. So hopefully you guys are getting this clearly. I never know. Let me hit play and I'll make sure all this is plugged in correctly. It should be fine.
Vitamin C.
Yeah, vitamin C. And China's just like, hey, we don't have it or you're done. Or if they want to be a bad actor about it. So, I mean, I think the best thing that we could do for our national security is bring back our industry and our production, and energy is a huge one. We saw what happened when Biden turned off the Keystone XL pipeline, and now gas prices rise. I mean, Hillary would complain all day and want to go potentially get in wars with Syria over strategically worthless land, or with wars with Russia to get into a fight over Syria. But at the same time, she lets she lets Russia become an oil giant. If we put U.S. oil back on the market, all those prices go down and Russia has less money to play with.
It starts to make sense. Now, with Syria, they want to run that pipeline, the gas pipeline.
Yes.
With Russia, the U.S. shuts down the Keystone pipeline. The U.S., then the colonial hack happens. We have all these problems. Then Governor Gretchen Whitmer says she wants to shut down this pipeline.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, maybe the issue is they want to maintain the system of the U.S. reserve currency for oil. So take U.S. oil off the market so that the United States has to spend money on other people's oil, giving them an incentive to keep producing, giving them an incentive to stay on the U.S. dollar, right?
Wow.
Propping up the system that's failing.
Yeah.
Whereas under Trump, it was energy independence.
Yeah, I like the methodology where we just sell our own oil
I like
and produce it,
I like the methodology of not regime change wars.
Exactly.
Not going in nation building and then being more self-reliant. And it's fascinating to me that it's the conservatives that are actually arguing for more cooperation at this point. Yeah. And it's the Democrats, the whole political ecosystem is like flipped. The neocons were like, we're going to go in and we're going to remove this guy and we're going to build this thing.
Right.
Now the conservatives are like, no, we're not isolationists. We just want to do our thing and sell and build. And that's international cooperation.
Right.
That's not isolationism.
Yeah.
So when they smear the populist right as like nationalist authoritarians or whatever, it's like they're the ones saying not to go to war and to make America great, which would require America to negotiate and trade with the rest of the world in a more peaceful way. But somehow these anti-war leftists view Trump as the problem. Well, I shouldn't say all of them, because a lot of them know how bad Biden and the Democrats are. But now we get Joe Biden. And another thing that we've heard is, Russia's building oil pipelines, becoming oil rich, and the U.S. is shutting ours down, taking away our independence.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They don't want to drop the system. They want the U.S. reserve currency to be this permanent system. I guess they don't want people in this country working.
Yeah, that's a crazy way to go about it, because if you want Russia to behave better, just take away some of their money, and you do that by bringing up the price of American oil or putting American oil back on the market.
If Americans don't produce anything, but the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency, then we don't have to produce all that much because we can just print money and then we get to buy whatever we want. We don't got to do work. That's unhealthy.
Yeah, it's insane.
Rolling up your sleeves and doing hard work is good
Right.
for personal development.
Yeah.
So I look at many of these socialist young people. They claim to represent workers, but they don't work. They've never worked for the most part.
Exactly.
I don't want to say every single one, but they think working at the college library or Starbucks is a real job. It's like go lift 50,000 pounds of luggage working in an airport and watching these
Exactly.
All right, so that's good enough on this. I don't need to stay on this forever. You can go watch the rest of it if you want, and there's a lot more said there in a very short period of time that is very significant. And what Tim's ending up there with is what Tank always says over on the Ends Justify the Memes. He says that there are these workers who are the actual blue-collar workers of the world, guys like me, who enjoy the physical labor, don't feel like I'm always being taken advantage of, although there are things. I mean, there's a reason why I don't do specific jobs anymore. There are things. But they more have to do with my moral convictions. But these people, they don't feel exploited generally. And it's the college kids that do. But the more important thing is to the monetary system. And he gets into that, I believe, within that. They talk about it for a good 15, 20 minutes. So I would assume that the IRL podcast will have a clip with all that in it if you want to go look at it. And I highly suggest you do. Because again, like I said, Tim Pool is speaking to ideas that we are talking about that aren't mainstream ideas. Now, one of the things that drives me nuts about Tim is always talking about a standalone complex instead of the conspiracy theory. But what he did last night was he did talk and point to specifically the World Economic Forum and said, and it is within minutes of that segment, or part of that conversation, I should say, it said that this is the Great Reset. And he's absolutely right. So that's good that he's saying that. It's good when Tucker Carlson talks about these things, whether they are 100% right, whether they think that we can save the federal government or not. And I don't think that Tim's talking anything like that. But it's good that people who have a larger audience and voice are getting these things out. And it's not people like me who have a couple hundred subs on YouTube. And not that I don't appreciate you all, because I do every day. You guys are highly motivating for me to be here, to continue to show up every day. Now, don't get me wrong. I am absolutely compelled to do this. So regardless if you show up or not, I'll be here. But it does help with my motivation. And whatever the views are that I'm getting, I know that it will take time. But I also I'm not speaking about things that are maybe well known or thought of or even regarded, because a lot of people just think, oh no, a big government's awesome. That's the way we need to go. Oh, no, it isn't. All this is just silliness right now. Oh, Trump's evil. And of course, everything Biden's doing is for your own good. And people think this way. They really do. And Shelley put here in the comments, it says incompetence or malice hasn't been too consistent, and you are not allowed to have dialogue or about subjects. That rules out incompetence. Well, yeah. But in part, it doesn't. Because if you're stupid and you think that like hate speech isn't free speech, those kind of things. Like, first off, there's no such thing as hate speech. Anything that hurts my feelings, I could construe it as hate speech. Right? So that's obviously absurd. And the other thing is an old saying that I grew up with, and you probably did too, Shelley. I would say Holly probably did. Is sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Right? And I don't know how the whole thing goes there, but there's some truth to that. Now, can you cause psychological damage to people through words? Absolutely. Does psychological damage happen to someone, though, who has a stable mental capacity, who has a stable emotional capacity, who is an individual who's strong and set in their morals and beliefs, I think it's going to be a lot less likely. And that's one of the issues with the psychological damage today to all these young people, is that they, frankly, they're not stable. They've been born and bred to be weak. There's no stability in weakness, folks. There's a reason why there is a parable, or an analogy, if you would, a metaphor in the Bible of the house that Christ built his church on being on the rock, and those who do not make their foundations within him on the Sermon on the Mount, which he gave prior to that statement, they do not build on it, they build on sand. It gets quickly taken out from under them. But the rock has stability. You have to have stable ground in which to operate. And if you do not, then everything else that you touch will not be stable. Whether it be relationships, jobs, whatever it is. It's just the way it works, guys. It is the way that it works. Anyways, I do want to play this because this is old Rand Paul. Hopefully I don't get any error messages. No one said anything, so I'm assuming sound and everything went through. I know a lot of you, given the time of day, are working right now. And given that you are further west than I am. So, all but Sam. I don't even know if Sam's here today. But Sam, I'm definitely further west than you at the moment.
News that it's exciting. President Biden has announced that by July 4th, 3 people can get together, so as long as they're related in the same family, if they've all been vaccinated, and they can take their mask off for a second. 3 people after July 4th, if you're related and you've been vaccinated. I mean, how out of touch is that? I mean, does he go out? Does he know any real people? Is anybody paying attention to anything he is saying? Does he really think that he's sort of instilling confidence in us by going on a Zoom call and putting a mask on? Has Dr. Fauci told him that he can catch it through the webcam somehow? I mean, this is insane. But these are the people leading our country and telling us, what we can and cannot do. The governor's not a lot better. In fact, I would say the governor's worse than most of the Democrat governors around the country as far as his restrictions. And I think the burden should be on these people. If they're going to take your freedoms from you, the burden on them is to prove that there's some kind of science. I still might oppose it even if the science were there, but they need to have a burden to prove to us that what they're doing and telling us actually has some science that supports that it would actually work. There really isn't any. The trajectory of the virus probably was unaltered by any of the things you were told to do. In fact, the whole idea of 6-foot distancing or 3-foot distancing, they've now said probably none of that makes any sense, and it can probably spread 50 feet. And so there probably were times in a very enclosed setting when people hadn't been vaccinated and it was all throughout your community that being inside with other people probably wasn't a good idea. But the thing is it kind of depends on who you are. There are different risk factors based on different people. If you're 25 years old, the death rate is higher for being struck by lightning. You're more likely to be struck by lightning under 25 than to die from COVID. But if you're over 70 or over 70 and overweight, your risks go up dramatically. And there is a real risk. I don't think we should say there's no risk. There is a real risk for certain people. And so I'm not opposed to the vaccine. I think people ought to take it if you're in a risk category. If you're younger.
Now, this is a true statistic, your risk in the being struck by lightning. And I do want to say this. YouTube, I could have not have said this on several months ago. This is on Forbes. Forbes breaking news. So if they need to come after me, and they need to go after Forbes as well. And Rand Paul is a doctor, and he's been a practicing doctor most of his life up until he got into the Kentucky legislature, from what I understand. And in fact, he still practices. He does, I think he goes down to South America every year and does charity work by removing people's cataracts from their eyes. So, there's that. Unlike old fascist Fauci, who has been in his position since 1982. He is the definitive bureaucrat of the federal government. Completely incompetent, has no idea what he's talking about, set up all kinds of things. lies, flip-flops, highest paid individual within the government. And again, I'm seeing all this stuff come out. I see stuff like someone much larger YouTube-wise, like Tim Pool, talk about certain things, and I think, dude, but you're talking about what we're speculating now, things that we knew months ago. I made videos about this stuff months ago. Some of my videos I made about this, which is now fact, apparently, were removed by YouTube. The facts that I spoke, that I knew very well, were facts because I'm not an ideologue and I know how to sift through data and understand the efficacy of a study and if it's done poorly or not. But, and I don't tend to follow people blindly either, or things blindly. I think that's a silly way to go about life unless you are very, very mentally challenged. And even then, man, that's a good way for you to be walked into a bad scenario. In any case, the things that he points to here are very clear, and all of a sudden, we are allowed to speak about them. We're allowed to speak about the realities because now Fauci and others have decided that those realities exist. Before the consensus, before the experts could decide about certain things in the past, we couldn't talk about them. Now it's okay. And again, it always reminds me of, Winston in 1984 and how he was literally part of developing the propaganda and knew that. But then when he was retold by the officials that the things before were lies and this is the new truth, he just went along with it. This is the society we live in. And by the way, Winston wasn't particularly bright in that book, and neither is the majority of our society for a reason. For a reason.
Or if you think you've had it, I think it's a reasonable thing to be tested to see if you have antibodies to it already. I had it last spring, and so far there's no evidence of the immunity waning. And people say, well, you don't know. You don't know how long your immunity is going to last. And I was like, well, you don't know how long the vaccine's going to last. I mean, none of us know how long this will last, but common sense usually tells you that when you've had a previous infection with something, you have some immunity. And I didn't get any symptoms the last time. I think I probably won't get many the next time since I already have some immunity to the disease. But that's my decision. I'm not going to tell you what to do. In a free society, everybody judges their own risk. You're going to decide whether to get in a car, which is extremely dangerous, much more dangerous than anything you'll do in your life is a car. But we don't submit to the government that the government's going to put a governor on our car that we can't go more than 25 miles an hour. We'd save a lot of lives, but we just sort of accept the risk. I heard someone giving a speech the other day and they were talking about, an invention. And if there was this invention, but we knew it would aid in commerce and it would speed up a lot of things in our life and our life would be materially better, but 40,000 people would die a year if we allowed this invention to come forward, would you do it? And most people are like, no, that sounds terrible, all these deaths. Well, that's the car. I mean, the car has all these pluses, but it still has lots of deaths that we get from cars each year. So we've sort of lost our head in the sense that really we should think about risk, make these decisions individually, and it's sort of to each his own. While I'm a big advocate of taking the vaccine, my parents won't take it. They're in their 80s, but they won't take it. And that's, and if you've met my dad or read about dad, he is going to make his own decisions and he's not going to listen to his kids. But several of us are doctors and work with COVID patients and have taken it. After I had COVID, I went to the hospital and volunteered in the hospital for a few weeks. But the one thing I will tell you is the rules in the hospital, for safety's sake, is if you go in a COVID patient's room, you wear an N95 mask. You don't cut up your T-shirt and put your T-shirt on your face. It doesn't work. I mean, they've done studies on this. So when Fauci first came out, he said, none of the masks work. And he knew that that was a lie. It's what Plato called a noble lie. He thinks we're too stupid to understand the truth, but he didn't want you to buy the N95 mask because he thought they needed to be in the hospital first and we'd run out. And it's not a reasonable thing, but we should just be honest with people and say, look, we're going to ask the suppliers to send the N95 masks to the hospital first. They are the best masks and they work. Instead, he said when he finally came out, it said none of them worked. Then 3 weeks later, he came out and said they all work. It's equally not true. Because if you blow particles through a cloth mask the same size as a virus, 97% of the particles go right through the cloth mask. So the cloth mask.
If you can smell someone's fart through your mask, to put it bluntly, folks, it's not working for you.
Really don't work. The surgical.
I don't know if any of you have ever done a fit test. A fit test is what you do with an N95 or above style mask to make sure it doesn't work, and they spray a bittering agent into generally like a hood, and if you can taste it, the mask isn't fitted properly.
Surgical masks are a little bit better than the N95 masks work. One of the things that Dr. Fauci could spend some time telling us, but he's not telling us, I'm going to tell you today because it's the most important thing. We're still going to get COVID. It's not as active out there. It's a lot less active, but you still may have somebody who's a family member or friend who gets it in town, and this is what you need to know, and it can save your life. If you get it, you've got a bronchitis, and you begin coughing, there is a treatment, and it reduces your death rate like 80%. It's called monoclonal antibodies. Donald Trump got them. Chris Christie got them. Giuliani got them.
Have you guys heard about any of this in the mainstream media, perchance? This was released on May 22nd, so this is not old. Not old at all. Here we are, halfway into 2021. Have you been hearing about this? Is this what you've heard, that your risk of death or hospitalization can be reduced by 80 some odd % by some basic medications?
I have a family member who had metastatic cancer. She got them and survived. So the thing is people can survive, and these really work, but there's a window of time. If you wait too long, I had a friend who's about 41, overweight. He got it, almost died, but he waited too long. But nobody was telling him he needed to get to the hospital sooner. You can't wait, and like most men, I don't want to make a sexist argument, but men resist going to the doctor. They just stay home, stay home, stay home. But if you get COVID and you're coughing, you need to get in to see the doctor because there is a treatment and it reduces your death rate 80%. Instead, you've got people like Sanjay Gupta and Dr. Fauci on TV saying, oh, the mask is the most important thing. It's more important than the vaccine. Well, no, it's not. The mask really probably doesn't work much at all. Almost everybody that's gotten the infection in the last 2 months, as the numbers went like this, said they were wearing their mask all the time. So
and the Danish study bears that out as well. If you go look at the numbers on the Danish study, I think 5,000 people originally participated, and it dwindled down to about 3. But the difference between people who wore masks and didn't wear masks and the infection rate was 0.02 or 0.3 or something like that. It was nothing. It was absolutely nothing. And of the people who got infected, it was about 2%. That is, of everyone in the study on either side. It was about 2% of the people that went about their daily lives. So there you go. There's that.
Frankly, you can get it with your mask. The vaccine probably does work 90 some odd % of the time, 95% of the time. So really the answer to stopping this is either natural immunity, which a lot of people have gotten, plus the vaccine. Now, they completely discount it. The reason why Fauci is still so upset and why Bashir is acting like a crazy person is that they don't count natural immunity, the people who've had it. So 32 million people, there's a website, you can see how many people have had COVID. 32 million people have had it. But the CDC, which is very conservative and not tending to exaggerate, estimates that 2 people for every 1 person is listed have gotten it. Why? Because a lot of young people got it and they didn't know it. So if you got it and one of you had the flu and you know you had COVID last year and you have 2 kids, chances are your kids may have had it and you just didn't know it if you didn't test them. So there's at least 2 for every 1, which means we have 100 million people in our country who have had it. That's a third of the country had it, but we also have over a third that's vaccinated. Now there's some overlap, but really.
So, and what he's talking about here is the race to herd immunity and how we're about there. And again, guys, this was more of a deal of, in my opinion, just an opinion, but it's what the data seems to bear out of reclassifying how we classify deaths. That was the majority of this. I'm not saying that some people didn't have to go, more people maybe didn't have to go in the hospital, but most likely we were just paying more attention to it. Notice, obviously, as always, the flu numbers have gone down, all those other things. The the excess death rate cannot be attributed to this. There are other factors, which probably were deaths of despair or economic hardship. Things that we're not talking about, because this whole thing was used to whip you up into a frenzy and control you. And it was kind of a test case. They throw these things out to test compliance. And perhaps it was to derail the Trump campaign. By the way, they talk about that on Tim's show last night. I believe I ended up watching the whole thing, but I ended up not paying attention so much later on because I was talking to Michael last night. So, it is what it is. We didn't get home last night till like 10:30 or later. So, yeah. In any case, so I guess my point was I didn't watch it live, but yeah, I watched the beginning of it, the first hour of it for sure. There was good stuff there. Let's keep going with Dr. Paul here. And again, he's saying very moderate, normal stuff that I've said in the past and have been labeled a heretic and crazy and whatever else. And, I knew I was right then, just like now. But what never ceases to amaze me, it doesn't really surprise me, but in a way it does, is how foolish people are and how willing they are to bring upon their own servitude.
Really, we are close to the 2/3 that we kind of need, 2/3 plus some. And so I think we're very close to being over it. And I can see by the crowd here, you guys kind of think we're beyond this, and I think we may be. But we've got to really get to the point where we can get back to normal. Probably, and Adrian can reinforce this, probably the worst thing that's happened is at the state level with the powers that the governor has assumed. So we have a couple of problems in Kentucky. The governor assumed these powers in March. They went out of session, and so for 9 months, our legislature is completely powerless. To me, this is sort of reminiscent of when the king would dissolve Parliament. When he got mad at Parliament, he would just kick them out, and they couldn't come back, and he wouldn't let them come back in session. I think that's a defect in our state. I think we need to allow power for the state, for the legislature to come back in session. Now, if you want to limit what they come back in for, that'd be fine. You could say they only come back in maybe to discuss or debate edicts, that the governor puts forward. But we have to allow them to have the power to come back in. Otherwise, for 9 months, he is essentially a dictator. So when they came back in legislative session in January, there's emergency rules that were given to the governor back in the 90s. When the bill was passed, I think people assumed it would be like a tornado hits Lawrenceburg and the National Guard brings you blankets and food and water. Most of us would accept that as an emergency. But if you want to close a restaurant down for a year and say you can only have 25% occupancy, that's a policy. That's like legislation. That's not an emergency. That's not a 3-day thing where we're helping people with water and food. This is a major economic policy. And to say that only one person can do that with his sole authority, with no checks and balances from the legislature, is awful. I think this is the biggest constitutional issue, bigger than, I know there's a lot of important stuff in Washington. The issue we have with the governor and unlimited power is the biggest issue of our time. It's going to be decided by the Supreme Court. So the state legislature passed a law restricting his powers, and he immediately went to court, sued them, got a liberal judge in Frankfurt. Surprise, surprise. I don't know how he found a liberal judge in Frankfurt. I guess the opposite would really be true. Could you find a conservative judge in Frankfurt? But anyway, the judge put an injunction, and now it's going to go to the Supreme Court in June. But the governor is arguing that he has inherent power. I'd say he's been anointed by God. He's like a king of old. He's been told, and this is what he argues, that he can do whatever he wants no matter what the state legislature says.
And there are many governors doing that, guys. I'm not going to stay with this. You can watch the rest of the video because it is 4 p.m. Eastern now, and I want to get into some reading. I also have Heaven on Earth for you guys. I have 10 minutes left in that. 10 minutes. So let's go over some of that real quick, and then I'll get into the readings, which is going to be the politics of obedience and Bastiat's the law. And maybe I'll go a little bit past 5 today. We'll see. So, real quick though, this crazy times, Rand Paul takes aim at Pelosi Schumer agenda. He doesn't talk about them so much specifically, but you should go watch this because it's pretty good. If my lighting's weird, guys, I don't know. I try to get more lighting in here. Maybe I need to close one window and not the other. Let me see. One blind and not the other. I think that maybe looks a little bit better. I don't know. Real high-tech production here. So yeah, let's do some heaven on earth and get the last 10 minutes of this done. I rewound it just a minute or two because we were about at the 2 hour and 30 minute ish mark.
Non-reformist reform is to fight for these kinds of changes and many others in a manner which leaves us, when we win, not going home, but desiring more.
Many at the conference said the anti-globalization and anti-war movements may hold the seeds of socialism's future. But some believe the idea might not always go by the same name.
A lot of people, when they hear that label, they immediately reject it. Oh, socialism, I've been taught that that's wrong. So I don't necessarily feel the need to use that label. I mean, I like the term economic democracy. I think that's a fantastic term because I think that's the way people can start to think about it. We need to start extending democracy to the sphere of economics.
The rich pay.
Here and
Economic democracy, by the way, folks, would be free markets. Like, if we're going to vote with our dollar, that kind of thing, that's called free markets. Socialism, you don't get to vote with your dollar. You're forced into what your dollar can spend. There are only so many products.
elsewhere, there seem to be no shortage of arguments that socialist ideas can still play a vital role in politics.
If you look at what some of the market ideologues were saying at the time that the wall came down at the end of the 1980s, when their victory dances were so exaggerated, that they were very much, seemed to me, like the Marxists of old, who thought they had sort of cracked the secret of history. But of course you don't crack the secret of history because you find it throws up new problems for you. The market won in that sense, insofar as there was no organised alternative to it. Hadn't won in the sense that the choice had not been removed as to whether you want a market economy.
There's no organized alternative, right, because it's an organic process, market economies. There are no alternatives. There are only market economies, guys. That's what economies are. Everything else is just tyranny in how they try to control and manipulate it. And again, as I always say, I'm sure there's some big brain out there that wants to argue this with me. They're not talking about first principles. They never are. They have to obfuscate those things. They obfuscate them so that they can manipulate you with their dazzle words and make you think that they're very smart. The reality is that we live in an anthroposcopic world. We have things, we have death in the world. We have limited resources. We have things fading out. And people have to create and produce in order to keep things going, or they will fall apart naturally. So there is no way to organize this. If you create socialistic style markets, you then get free markets and what's called the black market. You just don't get the protections of the approved government. It's just how it works. It's a reality you cannot escape. It happens in every single communist country. There's always a black market, no matter how strictly it is regulated. There are always ways to get certain goods. So let's keep going.
Or whether you want to extend that into a market society.
Social democracy has always been characterized by its belief that markets have an important economic function, but its distaste for their impact on social and political outcomes. This is what differentiates social democrats from Marxists, from communists. And this sense, or this desire to use the market to harness the most powerful economic mechanism available, but to not allow it to kind of determine what happens in the political or social sphere. This is
Well, the best way to do that would to not allow it to be part of the political sphere. It's going to always affect the social sphere. And those who have the most capital will probably get more involved in the political sphere as they have more leisure and more influence. But that's why we also have to understand the scaling problem, Dunbar's number, and what that means for each individual in the greater whole of society.
Still an idea or a vision that has immense appeal and is still very relevant to the 21st century.
The new century begins. Social democratic parties govern most of Europe. But the policies they offer bear little resemblance to the heady dreams of their socialist forebears. Amid electoral politics, the quest to remake human nature and create a heaven on earth has all but been abandoned.
It turns out that social democracy or democratic socialism is a contradiction in terms. In many cases, socialist parties have gotten it into power, like Mitterrand France, like Attlee in England, like German social democrats, and set about trying to march step by step to socialism. In every single case, after a certain number of years, they've reversed course. For all the socialist parties we've had in scores of countries around the world, there's not been one case in which a free electorate has wanted to continue a march all the way to socialism. They've always taken a few steps that way and then wanted to pull back.
So they want to take a few steps towards socialism and then they want to pull back. Unfortunately, once you take those first few steps, it is really hard to pull back because power tends to consolidate its power and hold on to it. And this is the fundamental flaw of all Marxist theory in bringing up the ideas of having a totalitarian state, and then it would suddenly dissolve itself and everyone would live in communistic anarchy, and not the crazy anarchy, but without government, the actual literal definition of the word. That is utopian, my friends. That is not real. That will never happen. No person who has that much power would ever give such a thing up, or very few, like men like George Washington would give it up. The majority of men are not that morally sound.
The farthest socialism ever advanced democratically was in Israel's kibbutzim. For years, the kibbutzim had been tiptoeing away from a completely communal way of life. But basic socialist principles still held. Members contributed what they could, and the kibbutz provided for their needs. Now, though, communities like Ginosar are undergoing a transformation so complete, many wonder they can still call themselves kibbutzim.
The first generation followed in our footsteps, the second generation less, and the third generation, the ones who now are running the kibbutz, they're completely different.
It all began in the late 1970s, when Israel's labor government fell to the conservatives, and the kibbutzim lost much of the financial support that had sustained them. When a debt crisis hit Israel in 1985, the kibbutzim found themselves holding loans they could not pay back.
Until 1985, the kibbutz member could always say to himself, well, there are problems, we're not so sure about whether our way of life is better than the way the rest of the world lives, but it works. After this, after the economic crisis hit, they couldn't say that anymore.
By the late 1970s and early 1980s, The first children born on the kibbutzim had grown up and had children and grandchildren of their own. Now that the urgent task of building a nation had passed, the younger generations were becoming disillusioned with life on the kibbutz.
The kibbutzniks shared with other socialists the idea that people were a product of their socialization, and that if you brought people up in a system of complete justice, you could create a new man, that is, someone who was devoid of selfish individualism and who would really think and live for the welfare of the group as a whole. And it turns out to be exactly the opposite.
The kibbutz children grew up into intelligent, enterprising, hard-working, constructive individuals, but they did not grow up as socialists.
We lived a very austere life, the most one could, and this didn't appeal to the children. As long as they lived within the warm confines of the kibbutz, they didn't see what went on outside. The moment they saw there was something completely different in the army and elsewhere, that's when the problem started with people leaving.
Now, see, this is a problem of foresight. I saw this, or had thought about this, I should say, because I haven't watched this in a while, guys. I'm not like watching ahead or anything of you. But I was thinking about this problem actually the other day, and that the things in the future that we instill into our children need to be well understood, and we need to think about how we develop our societies, right, for the future, our communities for the future. So let's say that we are fortunate enough to get some land and go off and live kind of on our own, like the Amish or something, right? And we start to build little communities, and we have our own blacksmiths, we have our own tanners, we have our own we have women that make clothing, that knit and those kind of things. We have gunsmiths, we have people that raise animals. Basically, we have our own little town and community. Well, we have to find out a way to develop our children's talents with that. And the traditional way would be, well, you just did what your father did. Hence the name Smith being so popular, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? That his last name means blacksmith. We have to understand that maybe that's not the way that to teach our children. Maybe they will be interested in it, but yes, pleb ranch. I'm not just talking about pleb ranch though. I'm talking about my own pleb ranch, which we don't necessarily call that, but whatever we're going to work out here in the future. What we really need to understand is that we need to give our children the opportunity to explore their talents and what they're interested in. And so maybe as we educate them in all of these skills, and those who rise to the top at their level of skill may pursue these jobs and careers. Hopefully we make well-rounded individuals that have a little bit of skill in many things, whether it be woodworking, blacksmithing, knitting, whatever it is. Maybe it's straight farm labor. But instead of trying to shoehorn our children, we do need to allow them to make choices. And the reason for this is because when you don't allow choices, folks, people rebel. You have to give them a limited number of choices. There is always a question of infinite choices. Infinite choices can be a problem because people can't make up their minds, or they get buyer's remorse, or all kinds of other stuff. But keeping this simple, we have to have a way to raise our children in these communities, to focus them on these jobs that need to be done for the future, or they will leave the community and they will go seek out the world. And I expect that to happen to some degree, mind you. One of the things that the Amish do is Rumspringa. They allow children of, I think, when they're 16, 17, 18, something like that, to go out for a year or two. And most people return to the Amish community. On the other hand, a lot go out into the world, get hooked on crack and meth and all kinds of other stuff, get addicted to sex, and never return. So these are things, though, that we have to think about. Now, these socialists, they're disappointed because this is their lifestyle, but their children go to seek out a capitalistic lifestyle because their children see the prosperity within it. So again, if you want to build something, it must last. And I see this a lot too, because West Virginia has a lot of dilapidated, destroyed towns where West Virginia actually used to have some influence in American politics. It still does because of Joe Manchin, but otherwise not so much. Branch Bilvidians. That's a pretty good one, Thane. I don't know about that, though. I don't think Waco was right, but I try not to... I try to distance myself a little bit from Koresh, considering that he had some wild beliefs, in my opinion. And I do have some sympathies for some of their beliefs from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, just because I was exposed to some of those things when I was younger. But yeah, I don't think God wanted him to be banging a bunch of girls, but I mean, David sure did. So, anyways.
Moshe Abbas's daughter Noah was one of those who considered leaving.
I think the kibbutz is generally not natural. It goes completely against nature. It's the complete opposite of human nature. Because you work very hard and give everything you've got. You work at several jobs, and in return you get the same as someone who doesn't work.
Listen to that. A socialist saying that socialism is against human nature. It's amazing. Yeah, what they're practicing is tribal living with no large support network, and that's why people flee it, because the technology is better. There's more social ties in the world than, a tribe of 20 or 100 people or whatever, worried about another tribe invading them and just getting resources for themselves, right? And therefore, trade comes about, people exchange things. This is basic anthropology and anthropological economics, even though that's not studied very hardcore generally.
To keep skilled workers, Genosar and other kibbutzim began paying salaries based not on need, but on market value. They even began to hire foreign labor for the lowest paying jobs.
They brought in advisors from the outside that said, well, I was looking after the kibbutz gardens is worth this and this per month. The teacher in the school is worth so much, and the childcare worker in the kindergarten is worth this much. And everyone got their own wage. That, to my mind, is the crucial change in the kibbutz. When the principle of from each according to his ability to each according to his needs was changed, and people got what they earned.
Today, Genosar has joined most of the rest of the world in embracing capitalism.
Today, they have joined the rest of the world in embracing the reality of life. Billville. Yeah. I don't know. We're going to be a bunch of hillbillies, I think. I don't know. I guess I mentioned before, I talked to Joshua Ham a few days ago. He's got a pretty viable plan, it looks like. So we'll continue to talk about it, but to build up a business and whatever else, something that's not like a bunch of crazy militia people out in the woods, because that's not really what I'm looking toward either. Memes Town. Well, Holly, not that I'm suggesting this, but yeah, we would be Gatorade folks then, and ethylene glycol, not cyanide, would be our choice of poison. Just throwing that out there.
And like 3/4 of the kibbutzim, it is working toward turning over ownership of housing to individual members. The kibbutzniks will become homeowners.
I think those who stayed thanks to the changes. If changes hadn't been made, I wouldn't be here either. And thanks to the changes, we saved every penny. As a school principal, and my husband who works at 2 jobs, we managed to get our own private car. 2 weeks ago, at the age of almost 43, I have a car. I have independence, and this change for me is excellent.
I had a car when I was 16. It was a piece of crap, but I had a car. I don't know about this 43-year-old thing. So, I mean, my car was like literally, it had a hole in the floor. We had to weld a panel too for it to pass inspection. But yeah, just saying.
It became worthwhile to work. In the past, we used to work because of values, and now there are new values. The supreme value, we are ordinary human beings after all, is money, and quality of living, and the promise to our children that they will get something.
The supreme value is not money. This is how these people have their heads completely wrong. Wealth should not be your supreme value, folks. That is something that I believe a socialist would say, right?
All these changes have led many to wonder if the kibbutzim are on their way to becoming little more than suburbs with a socialist heritage.
There was no chance that we could continue this kind of lifestyle, which is found nowhere else in the world. Nowhere else where people of their own free will would live for years and years in such a communal and collective way. The country doesn't need us anymore. This thing, this way of life, has reached its end. It has spent itself. As far as reason goes, the kibbutz must come to an end.
The kibbutzim were the one place or group of places on earth where real, pure socialism, just as it was imagined by all the great socialist visionaries, was actually put into practice and put into practice democratically. And the ironic ending was that the same people, after a certain number of years, democratically voted to turn away from socialism and to put the kibbutz on some other basis. And I think that constitutes the final proof that socialism, except coerced, as in China or Russia, but socialism as a voluntary way for societies to live is simply an impossibility, that people ultimately won't be satisfied living that way.
Because people ultimately want to manifest their own destiny of their lives, and you cannot do such a thing in any sort of socialist system if you do not have the ability to own your own property or to work basically at your own discretion.
As you might imagine, I am not a socialist, although I applaud some of the reforms that socialists brought our way. But as I think about socialism, my thoughts keep returning to America. At the same time the socialist faith was beginning to take shape on the European continent, a group of former British colonists were also building a new society, but they had something different in mind. America's founders tailored our system to people as they are, not as they should be in some ideal world in the future. And that system has seen socialism's rise and now its decline. Democratic capitalism is not perfect, but it works as well as anything we've seen. For those who want to improve the world, it's something to keep in mind. Thank you for watching. For Think Tank, I'm Ben Wattenberg.
All righty. And that was that, as they say. That was the end. Finally, we got through it. It only took 14 weeks. I think it's been 3-ish. Holly said too much choice is what ruined the act of courtship, especially for women. Dating apps are getting you addicted to the app itself, not the humans on it. Yes and no. I don't think it's too much choice in that. Women aren't competing with each other. There used to be a competition between women that's been eliminated. And there was always a competition with men. Now, one man can get 20 of the top girls, and the girls will put up with it. That never, ever really happened in the past, unless you're talking about way in the past when, polygamy and harems existed. So, I mean, these aren't new struggles either, Holly, I would say. But generally, women, because of the risk of pregnancy and the need to be taken care of in many ways, weren't able to act this way. And so virginity specifically was protected, generally speaking. Or you would have been sold into slavery by your parents or someone who owned you one way or another to be a prostitute. Like, that was really the most common thing that happened in history with women and dating and whatever else. So, yeah, and also, I honestly think the beating down of men, because I've seen this back when I was a heathen. I literally remember being on Tinder, and I was hanging out with my buddy, and I was bored, and he was on there, and he was never getting dates. He's not a bad looking guy or anything. I don't think he knew how to interact or get the girls hooked. So I was going through, and at that time in my life, a big focus of mine was sex, of course, and so I'm like, dude, I need to find someone to get laid this weekend. Like, literally, I hate saying it because it sounds so bad, and it is bad, but and I'm flipping through, and there was this girl on there, and he goes, "Oh, I matched with her too," and he had matched like a day or two before. Got no response back from her or anything. I responded her, and I think I was out with her later on that night or the next day, and doing immoral things with her, of course, later on. So my point is that there are guys who will learn to work that system out, and there are other guys that will just learn to take their lickings and get frustrated and be mad. It's all about attitude. I never gave up. Now, when I came back to dating after I took about a year and a half off, it was a lot different because my mindset was different, and I could see the frustration that a lot of men have because I wasn't getting as many matches or this or that. But I also was looking for different things. I wasn't trying as hard. It was just a different game for me. It was a whole nother ordeal. In fact, it wasn't a game anymore. It was something that I took very seriously. So there's a lot of stuff with that, Holly. I think we could talk on it for a long time. In fact, I guess when you're on the Unjustified the Memes next Wednesday, or maybe this Sunday, if we decide to do a show this Sunday, I'll have to look into that. I'll talk to you later about it. I think that could be something we could delve into and opinions on and perspectives. One thing I do say often, or I like to bring to people's attentions, is just because one thing is true doesn't mean other things aren't true either. So Holly could be very correct in what she is saying, and yet there might be a multitude of other factors involved with it as well. I was over on Sniper's stream, Friday night for a brief moment, for about an hour or so. And I think that's one of the things that we got down to. We were talking about certain subjects, about like police officers and their motivations and police being defunded and whatever else. And we were talking about basically, or I was saying that many different perspectives from the people on the ASMR stream on Sniper's Nest were all true. It's not that one is more true than the other. These are all factors playing into this. So that has to be understood. So let's read some of the politics of obedience. Didn't mean to bury it an hour and a half into the show, but, wanted to talk about some more pertinent relative things, point you guys in certain directions. it's kind of hard when you've had 3 days off and you're used to doing this. Well, not technically, because I did do a stream Sunday for a little bit. But, when you're doing this regularly and you kind of step away from it, I had to try and figure out when I was streaming this week. Like I said, guys, reminder, probably will not stream tomorrow. I'll be back Thursday. My daughter's graduating. I will do the Ends Justify the Memes tomorrow night, but as far as anything here on All Minus One, just is probably not going to happen. So let's get into this text, man. It says, everyone knows that the fire from a little spark will increase the blaze ever higher as long as it finds wood to burn. Yet without being quenched by water, but merely by finding no more fuel to feed on, it consumes itself, dies down, and is no longer a flame. Similarly, the more tyrants pillage, the more they crave, the more they ruin and destroy, the more one yields to them and obeys them. By that much do they become mightier and more formidable. The reader to annihilate and destroy? Are they more formidable to the reader to annihilate and destroy? But if not one thing is yielded to them, if without any violence they are simply not obeyed, they become naked and undone, and as nothing, just as when the root receives no nourishment, the branch withers and dies. And I think that was the last thing I read on Friday. Now, this also reminds me to the story of the emperor's new clothes, or the emperor has no clothes. The idea that there were a bunch of sycophants around the emperor telling him that they could see the threads that he was wearing while he was naked, because if they couldn't and they saw him as naked, they were basically ignoramuses. They were of unwise counsel. So everyone had to tell the king, oh, of course, your clothes are so beautiful and so wonderful. Most of all politics, folks, is smoke and mirrors. It's misdirection. There's a saying called wag the dog you may have heard of. That is something that the media tends to do, or the politicians do. And it's the idea of, instead of the dog wagging its tail, the tail wags the dog, right? It is how they switch up the perspectives in order to deceive you. To achieve the good that they desire, the bold do not fear danger. The intelligent do not refuse to undergo suffering. It is the stupid and cowardly who are neither able to endure hardship nor to vindicate their rights. They stop at merely longing for them and lose through timidity the valor rused by the effort to claim their rights. Although the desire to enjoy them still remains as part of their nature, a longing common to both the wise and the foolish, to brave men and to cowards, is this longing for all things which, when acquired, would make them happy and contented. Yet one element appears to be lacking. I do not know how it happens that nature fails to place within the hearts of men a burning desire for liberty. Well, this is temperamental. We understand this more today. This is temperamental. We can go to Jonathan Haidt's Moral Foundations and look at that as well. There are very good reasons. And ancient philosophers actually were pretty close to being on point. I mean, Nietzsche talked very much about the master-slave morality. Not that he's an ancient philosopher of any sort. He's a modern philosopher. But they saw this. They understood it. This is something that people still struggle with, and we actually have these psychological paradigms and metrics to measure this more so than ever in the history of mankind. And those two metrics basically come down to the big five and the moral foundations. Now, I'm sure that there are others as well. We can look at the, obviously, political tribes test, the hidden tribes, that is. And we can look at other political compass tests or things of those natures, and compare all of these datas, these points of data. There are some people that simply merely want to be slaves, and there are some people that merely want to be masters, and then there are some people who wish to be free, just to go about their own way without any burden or hindrance. So, continuing, a blessing so great as so desirable that when it is lost, all evils follow thereafter. That's true. And even the blessing that remain lost taste and savor become of their corruption by servitude. Liberty is only joy upon which men do not seem to insist. For surely if they really wanted it, they would receive it. Apparently they refuse this wonderful privilege because it is so easily acquired. True enough. Wow, you guys just ditched me. I see how y'all are. No, kidding. But seriously, my viewership dropped down. I guess you guys have stuff to do. Come back and watch. Come back and watch. So, let's see here. Poor, wretched, and stupid peoples, nations determined on your own misfortune and blind to your own good, you bet yourselves be depraved before your eyes of the best part of your revenues. Your fields are plundered, your homes robbed, your family heirlooms taken away. You live in such a way that you cannot claim a single thing as your own. And it would seem that you consider yourselves lucky to be loaned your property, your family, and your very lives. All this havoc, this misfortune, this ruin, this sins upon you, not from alien foes, but from the one enemy whom you yourselves render as powerful as he is, for whom you go bravely to war, for whose greatness you do not refuse to offer your own bodies unto death. That is, obviously, the ruler, the kings, whoever the powers that be are, and you willingly offer this up to them. He who thus domineers over you has only 2 eyes and 2 hands, only one body, no more than is possessed by the least man among the infinite numbers dwelling in your cities. He is indeed nothing more than the power that you confer upon him to destroy you. Where has he acquired enough eyes to spy upon you, if you do not provide them yourselves? How can he have so many arms to beat you with if he does not borrow them from you? The feet that trample down your cities, where does he get them from if they are not your own? How does he have any power over you except through you? How would he dare assail you if he had no cooperation from you? What could he do to you if you yourselves did not convene with a thief who plunders you? If you were not accomplices of the murderers who kills you? If you were not traitors to yourselves? You sow your crops in order that he may ravage them, to install and furnish your homes, and to give him goods to pillage. You rear your daughters, that he may gratify his lust. You bring up your children in order that he may confer upon the greatest privilege he knows, to be led into battles, to be delivered to butchery, to be made the servants of his greed and the instruments of his vengeance. You yield your bodies up hard labor in order that he may indulge in this and his delights and wallow in his filthy pleasure. You weaken yourselves in order to make him the stronger and mightier, to hold you in check. From all these indignities, such as the very beast of the field would not endure, you can deliver yourself if you try. Not by taking action, but by merely willing to be free, resolved to serve no more, and you are at least freed. I do not ask that you place hands upon the tyrant to topple him over, but simply you support him no longer. Then you will behold him, like a great colossus whose pedestal has been pulled away, fall off his own weight and break into pieces. By the way, that is an allusion to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, which Daniel dreamed of. So we're going to come back. When we come back to this, we'll be in part 2 of it. Looks like I have my viewership back. That was really weird. Said it dropped down to 1 viewer, and now you guys are back up to 6. I had like 9 earlier. So which, no big deal. I'm not like trying to, you guys got stuff to do. I'm not trying to keep that much of a track, but really weird. Drop down to 2 and then 1. So, in any case, guys, we will be on part 2 of this when we come back on Thursday, since I cannot come back tomorrow. And we'll continue with this. Something interesting with the story of Nebuchadnezzar, it was a story of Daniel in the lion's den, if you're not aware of this. And Daniel would not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar. And the statue of him and worship him like a god. Yet we have Christians today not knowing their Bible or their understanding or warnings of it, or calling for monarchy. I'm not trying to rail on them, but monarchy is not what God intended for you guys. That was Old Testament, while Israel was in captivity. And part of that whole thing is the prophecies from the book of Daniel are reiterated in Revelations because it's part of the entire system. And that's exactly what Etienne de Bote, or however you pronounce his name, was talking about. All right, guys, so I got about 20 minutes or so. Let's see how far I can get through this. By the way, when I do come back, I'll probably be reading more texts and covering other stuff in the beginning. But again, I've had several days off. And this is stuff I wanted to bring to you. This is why it's hard for me to not want to stream, because there's so much to talk about, at least in my mind. So we were right below this, but I do want to reread this portion. It says, the socialist concept of liberty. But ought not the people be given a little liberty? But Mr. Considerate has assured us that liberty leads inevitably to monopoly. We understand that liberty means competition, but according to Mr. Louis Blanc, competition is a system that ruins the businessman and exterminates the people. Now, we know this isn't true, and I'm pretty sure I addressed this when I read this on Friday. It is for this reason that free people are ruined and exterminated in proportion to their degree of freedom. Possibly, Mr. Louis Blanc should observe the results of competition in, for example, Switzerland, Holland, England, and the United States. And as I mentioned Friday, these were the most free economies in the world today, and we are not even anywhere near that. Holland might be, because Holland being Amsterdam and the Netherlands, that is. And then Switzerland, the Schweiz, they are very free market. Same as Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Singapore, Hong Kong at one point, but China's coming in to take over, and many other nations that are city-states, believe it or not, like Luxembourg. Anyways, Mr. Louis Blanc also tells us that competition lends to monopoly, and by the same reasoning, he thus informs us that lower prices lead to high prices. Nope, not at all. And competition drives production to destructive activity, and that competition drains away the source of purchasing power. That competition forces an increase in production while the same enforces a decrease in consumption. All of this is absolutely backwards, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned that this is like Keynesianism. Lord Maynard Keynes came up with a backwards economic theory, much like MMT, from what I understand of it. Modern monetary theory, that is. Keynesianism and modern monetary theory, by the way, do not agree with each other, but they both lead to the same ends. And the more productive schools, the most intelligent schools, are the Chicago schools, which I don't think is perfect, but it's pretty good, and the Austrian school, which I think is the best school of economics. But, I'm no expert, so don't take my word on it. Go learn for yourself. From this, it follows that free people produce for the sake of not consuming, that liberty means oppression and madness among the people, and that Mr. Louis Blanc absolutely must attend to it. So here we have socialists fear all liberties. Well, what liberty should the legislator permit people to have? Liberty of conscience? But if this were permitted, we would see the people taking this opportunity to become atheists. Think about this, guys, today. Do we have liberty of conscience within the Western world today? Now, I am often addressing the United States, specifically because it's the country I live in. And specifically, it's because it's the country I am the most well-versed in the laws and the way things work. I will, on a time and occasion, talk about other nations in the Western world, but by no means am I any sort of expert. I often don't even know some of the most basic things of those nations. So, I'm speaking primarily to the Western world, but also to the United States, again, in case anyone was confused here. And are we not taught all the time our morality from the pulpit of the government? What do you think all this wokeness is within the government? Then liberty of education. But parents would pay professors to teach their children immorality and falsehoods. Besides, according to Mr. Theirs, if education were left to national liberty, it would cease to be national and we would be teaching our children the ideas of the Turks or Hindus, whereas thanks to legal despotism over education, our children now have the good fortune to be taught the noble ideas of the Romans. This is the converse of the reality, is it not? We're being taught the religions of the Turks and the Hindus, depending on where you live, especially the Turks. The ideas of them. We're being taught the religion of the left, the SJW. Woke scolds are teaching our children today, not because of liberty, but because of illiberalism. Illiberalism, that is the case against liberty, the people who wish to have tyranny, who believe that tyranny is a necessity to control mankind. They are the ones teaching your children poorly. And this is what you'll find is that everything the left says is upside down to the reality. Every time. They often start from a place that is good, like questioning something. But they go off into fantasy realms of how these processes actually work. How the material, real world actually works. It doesn't work like some hippie commune yoga retreat where magical things happen in your mind and therefore manifest in your life. That's not a reality, guys. That I don't care how many times you watch the movie The Secret or read the book or whatever. You cannot just wish something to be true and have it happen. Action must be taken. Then liberty of labor. But that would mean competition, which in turn leaves production unconsumed, ruins businesses, and exterminates the people. And again, it's the opposite. This is what socialization does. Perhaps liberty of trade, but everyone knows, and the advocates of protective tariffs have proved over and over again that freedom of trade ruins every person who engages in it, and that it is necessary to suppress freedom of trade in order to prosper. Possibly, then, liberty of association. But according to socialist doctrine, true liberty and voluntary association are in contradiction to each other. Well, obviously, that's just idiocracy right there. How can being voluntarily doing something be against liberty? They essentially are of the same root of freedom. In fact, let's look up their etymology very quickly. And we'll even use the old Google machine. So we'll go to voluntary and we'll type in etymology. Etymology, one of my favorite things. Ah, voluntas, meaning will, or your own will. That is willpower. Interesting. Willing, of one's free will. Interesting. And then we go down here to all the related words. Let's go back here. Well, I don't even need to go back. Let's go right here. Now I know the etymology of liberty. A very common word in Latin, actually. It's used quite a lot. Free choice, freedom, as to do one's choice. Does that not sound like free will? It's almost like these words are synonymous. It's amazing. It talks about the French notion of liberty. That's a whole nother thing we can get into. What I am concerned with is the Latin root libertarian, one who holds a doctrine of free will. License, privilege, permission. This is from Old French, license. That's where that actually comes from. I give you license. I give you liberty. Prison is the restraining from liberty. Licentiousness is an adjective for someone who's morally unrestrained. Medieval Latin, licentiousness, full of license, unrestrained. You see how these words start to work together. Magna Carta literally means great charter, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, we can get into all of that. But yeah, just a real quick view. We have 63 entries on the word liberty. And those were related words, of course. My mouse, if it wants to work here. And go here to liberal, generous, nobly born, noble, free, selfless, magnanimous, admirable. This is what liberal originally meant. By the way, folks. In a bad sense, extravagant or unrestrained. We would use the word libertine for that. Liberal, befitting free people, noble, generous, willing, zealous. Directly from the Latin word liberalis, noble, gracious. Generous, literally, of freedom, pertaining to or benefiting a free person. From liber, which is the root Latin word, free, unrestricted, unimpeded, unbridled, unchecked. And here it says licentiousness, that is having license. Here it gets into the Slavic, which we don't need to go into. But you guys get the point. You get the sense of this, right? I'm not going to do a whole etymological lesson here. So, it says possibly then liberty of association. But according to socialist doctrine, true liberty and a voluntary association are in contradiction to each other, and the purpose of the socialists is to surpass liberty of association precisely in order to force people to associate together in true liberty. Look, Bastiat was a smart guy. He knows that that's a bunch of nonsense, right? And so do you, clearly. Clearly then, the conscience of these social democrats cannot permit persons to have any liberty between they believe that the nature of mankind tends always towards every kind of degradation and disaster. Thus, of course, the legislatures must make plans for the people in order to save them from themselves. This line of reasoning brings us to a challenging question. If people are as incapable, as immoral, and as ignorant as the politicians indicate, then why is the right of these same people to vote defended with such passionate insistence? So that is, if these people are idiots, then why are the politicians propping them up to vote for them? It's a legitimate question, folks. Legitimate question. Well, hey, Val, thank you for the donation. Val says, quietly snuck in, but leaving for work now. Appreciate it. As always, over on Entropy. Guys, you can always donate over there if you like, or on DLive. But the biggest help you can really do is share this out, like it, help me grow. I want to grow the channel. Not trying to make this, I mean, granted, whatever. Exposing ideas, exposing these things would be wonderful to expose to, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. But I don't have any expectations for that. I'm not really trying to push for that kind of growth here. But I would like to get up to, 300, eventually 1,000 folks. Those kind of numbers, maybe 10 or 20,000 would be great. That also helps me, guys, as far as getting guests and stuff in. It gives me legitimacy. And as I make those connections and the things that I do outside of this, the more that things that are pro-liberty actually get done behind the scenes, not because of me alone, mind you. I'm not saying that I am that important in any way, shape, or form alone, but the more I can make those connections and do those kinds of things, and we can grow these ideas. Again, like I said, Tim Pool's podcast last night, a lot of the stuff they were talking about, spot on. And, it's good to see someone with that much influence, exposure, that is, to talk about some of the same things that I'm talking about. Tim has he needs a better understanding of history, and he needs to stop basically talking about standalone complexes, because there is no standalone complex, guys. This stuff is well too documented. Far too much documentation to believe it's just a few people believing in the same thing. Especially when they get together in Davos from companies all around the world and people all the way from Xi Jinping to people from the Biden administration getting on there and saying this is what we're trying to do as a world power. Like, that's just an absurd notion. But I get it. He doesn't want to go down the tinfoil. In any case, let's go on with a little bit more of this before I get out of here. Let's say we'll do another 10 or 15 minutes or so. Let's see. The Superman idea. This goes back to Nietzsche's Uberman, and I believe that this was printed around the same time. Nietzsche might have been a little bit later. Let's find that out real quick. Guys, let's see how well I can spell Nietzsche. I know it's got a Z in there. Das Übermensch. Okay, 1833. That's what I thought. Okay, I thought it was the 1800 or 1880s. So again, Bastiat's writing this, I believe, in the late 1840s, 1848. I might be wrong about that, but whatever. Again, understand where we came from, where these ideas were very much being talked about, influential at the time. Some of these guys were ahead of their time, obviously. The claims of these organizers of humanity raise another question, which I have often asked them, and which, so far as I know, they have never answered. If the natural tendency of mankind are so bad that it is not safe to permit people to be free, how is it that the tendencies of these organizers are always good? Well, they're not. They're not morally superior people. Now, I know Nancy Pelosi will tell you, I'm a Catholic. I'm a Christian. I don't wish ill will toward anybody. Yeah, right, Nancy. Tell me another knee slapper, please. You are all about power and authority. And you've done nothing that I can see in your time in office that is scriptural or biblical. So, but I will allow that judgment to come upon you later on under Christ or with us saints when that time comes. But I mean, it just the stuff people say that are religious that wish to push this stuff upon people and or say that they're religious, like Joe Biden saying he's Catholic. Joe Biden isn't a Catholic. Come on, guys. Joe Biden is not a devout religious individual in any way, shape, or form. You think his family would be the mess that it is, or he would be still he tried to plagiarize President Reagan days ago, the other week. It's absolute insanity. Absolute insanity. Do not the legislators and their appointed agents also belong to the human race, or do they believe that they themselves are made of a finer clay than the rest of mankind? The organizers maintain that society, when left undirected, rushes headlong to its inevitable destruction because the instincts of people are so perverse. The legislators claim to stop this suicidal course and to give it a saner direction. Apparently, then, the legislators and the organizers have received from heaven an intelligence and virtue that places them beyond and above mankind. If so, let them show their titles to this superiority. And again, like I said, anyone who is in the faith should think of this of all individuals. And I know there are those of you in the faith that respect certain individuals above you, and you should. But always know that they can lead you astray. Christ said, seek the truth, keep knocking, keep asking, and you will get the answers. And now there are debates about this, but as far as I understand, in the Greek, that is an imperative. It is an imperative to a continuation of action, meaning keep knocking, keep seeking, keep trying to understand. He said, call no man on earth your father, call no man on earth your teacher, but one. There is only one Father in heaven and one teacher on earth. Father in heaven is our Holy Father, the architect of the universe, God the Father, and Christ and is our teacher. He says the kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of God is within you. It's not what goes into a man, but what comes out that makes him holy. All these things, folks, we have to put together and understand that Christ is saying you have to seek it out on your own and understand it on your own. And this is not an easy task. And don't get me wrong, the scriptures at the same time are written simply. They really are. Intellectuals like to totally, I believe that there is depth there, don't get me wrong, but they like to totally make it overly complicated. And it should not be. A small child should be able to understand the ways of God. And they do. They would be shepherds over us, their sheep. Certainly such an arrangement proposes or presupposes that they are naturally superior to the rest of us. And certainly we are fully justified in demanding from the legislators and organizers proof of this natural superiority. And their proof to them is that they are where they are. They went to Harvard. I went to Princeton. You know, I am a Yale grad. All these things. Look at my wealth. Look at the connections I have. They mean nothing to me. You put your pants on one leg at a time, just like everyone else. God is no respecter of men. That is specifically in the Bible. Nor Greek, nor Jew, nor slave, nor free. God does not care about your ranking or your title in this world. He cares about your heart. The socialists reject free choice. Please understand that I do not dispute their right to invent social combinations, to advise them, to advocate them, and to try them upon themselves at their own expense and risk. But I do dispute their right to impose these plans upon us by law, by force, and to compel us to pay for them with our taxes. 100,000%. I do not insist the supporters of these various social schools of thought, the proud honest and the capitalists and the fortierists, the universalitarianists, the protectionists renounce their various ideas, I insist only that they renounce this one idea that they have in common. They need only to give up the idea of forcing us to acquiescence to their groups and series, their socialized projects, their free credit banks. Yeah, not good, folks. That's what caused the financial market crisis, the housing bubble of 2008. Free credit. Their Greco-Roman concept of morality, not the same concept of Christianity, by the way, folks. This is something I talked about with Michael the other week on the Justify the Memes, and that the Western Church is different than the Greek Church from the Orthodox, the Eastern Church. Because the Western Church came about and Greco-Roman ideas were highly, highly held up and held in competition to the scriptures. I don't think that happens so much in the East. And their commercial regulations, I ask only that we be permitted to decide upon these plans for ourselves, that we do not be forced to accept them directly or indirectly. If we find them to be contrary to our best interest or repugnant to our conscience. But these organizers desire access to the tax funds and to the power of the law in order to carry out their plans. In addition to being oppressive and unjust, this desire also implies the fatal supposition that the organizer is infallible and mankind is incompetent. But again, if persons are incompetent to judge for themselves, then why all this talk about universal suffrage? And I will leave that there as the causes of, or the cause of the French Revolution is next. Apparently I have a program come up here. So it's about 10 after 5. I appreciate you guys staying here for so long. Val, if you come back to rewatch this, thank you for the super chat over in the entropy. I got letter after F on D Live left me a message, but it's the flag raising of Iwo Jima. It's a GIF. So there's that. I don't have a lot in the chat today, guys. You guys were really kind of quiet, which means that you're really interested in watching, or I don't know. I'll show you right now. This dip right here is exactly what I was talking about. This is right when everyone disappeared. See that? It went from, had 6 of y'all, went down to 2, and then the 1, and all of a sudden, bing! So I don't know what that was about, but hey, whatever. In any case, guys, again, I won't be here tomorrow on All Minus One, but I will be back over on the Justify the Memes. We should have Wes Levin, make sure I pronounce his name correctly, there tomorrow. If you don't know him, he's over on Oozaloo's stream all the time. He does have his own YouTube channel. I will have it linked, but he hasn't put anything out in a while. He's on Yiz's show often. He was on Sniper's channel a little while ago. He's around, guys, and we're not snobs here. We just want to talk to people with ideas. So he'll run some memes with us. Hopefully we'll start on time because my daughter has graduation tomorrow and it's a drive-through. So who knows what kind of a cluster that is going to be. But any other announcements, I will let you know as the week goes on. But just do not expect me back on this channel till Thursday and Friday. So with that, guys, I appreciate y'all watching. Once again, if you come back, you watch this later, please give me a like. Please share this out. Put me in some internet forum. Show me out. Do whatever. I rely on you all to do that. I don't really show myself except for right here. So please do those things if you think I am worthwhile. Share it with your family, whoever you believe might be an individual who thinks this material that I'm presenting is important. And I know many of you apparently like to listen to me just because of my voice, which I do not think is that great. But hey, I'm not the I'm not the one listening to myself, so you are. When I listen to myself, I'm like, ugh. Just is what it is, guys. In any case, appreciate you all for being here once again. This has been All Minus One. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well.